Someone gives you a gift. It's nicer than anything you'd have gotten them, maybe way nicer. And instead of feeling warm, you feel a small jolt of panic. You know that feeling. Everyone does. It's not ingratitude. It's something more specific than that. A part of you is doing math it never agreed to do, calculating exactly how uneven this just became and what you now owe. That discomfort has a name, even though nobody ever taught it to you. You're tracking a debt. And the strange part isn't that you're tracking it. The strange part is why anyone would build a whole system around leaving debts open on purpose. Because that's exactly what a lot of human history did. Around 100 years ago, a young Polish anthropologist named Bronisław Malinowski got stranded on the Trobriand Islands, off the coast of Papua New Guinea, when the outbreak of the First World War stranded him. What was supposed to be a short visit turned into 3 years of living among people whose economy made no sense to him at first. Men were risking their lives, paddling canoes across open, dangerous ocean to trade 2 kinds of objects, red shell necklaces and white shell bracelets. Not food, not tools, not anything you could eat, wear for warmth or build with, just shell. The necklaces moved one direction around a ring of islands. The bracelets moved the opposite direction. Malinowski called it the Kula ring, and he spent years trying to answer one question. Why would anyone risk their life for something worthless? The shells weren't worthless. They just weren't valuable in the way he assumed value worked. Each man in the Kula had specific trading partners, sometimes on islands hundreds of miles away, sometimes speaking a different language entirely. And here's the part that reframes everything. Those partnerships lasted a lifetime. You didn't trade with a stranger once and move on. You built a relationship, kept it alive through repeated exchange, and passed it down to your children. The shells were never the point. The shells were an excuse. What was actually being exchanged was a reason to stay connected to someone you'd otherwise have no reason to trust at all. That's the first clue. But one culture doing something strange could be a coincidence. So look at a second one, on the opposite side of the world, doing something that looks even stranger. Along the Pacific Northwest coast of North America, communities like the Kwakwaka'wakw and Tlingit held ceremonies called potlatches. A chief would spend months, sometimes years, accumulating wealth. Then, in front of the entire community, he'd give it all away. Blankets, canoes, carved coppers worth a fortune. Sometimes he'd destroy it outright, burning goods that could have fed a family for a year. For a long time, Western observers looked at this and saw madness. Colonial governments in Canada actually banned the potlatch in 1885, convinced it was wasteful, backward, an obstacle to civilizing indigenous communities. They had it backwards. A potlatch wasn't waste. It was how status, resource rights, and alliances between clans got negotiated and recorded in a world with no written contracts. Recent economic research has modeled exactly how this worked. The songs, the dances, the retelling of who gave what to whom functioned as a kind of memory system, a living ledger. It let goods move to where they were needed even between people who might only meet once in a generation, and it made specialization and cooperation possible across huge stretches of coastline. Far from wasting wealth, the ceremony grew it, 2 cultures, thousands of miles apart. Neither one had contact with the other, and both of them built an economy around exchange that refuses to be finished. Here's the mechanism. Underneath both of them, a sale closes the loop. You pay, you receive the item, the transaction is done, and you owe each other nothing. That's efficient. It's also fragile, because the moment the deal closes, so does your reason to trust the other person again. A gift does the opposite. It leaves something unbalanced on purpose. And that imbalance is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. As long as the debt stays open, the relationship has to stay open too. You can't walk away from someone you still owe. That's what those shells and those coppers were actually doing. They weren't valuable because of what they were made of. They were valuable because they were vehicles for staying in debt to each other, on purpose, forever. Once you see that mechanism, you start noticing it everywhere, including right now on your phone. Every time you buy something from a stranger online, on eBay, Airbnb, Uber, you're relying on a system built to solve the exact same problem Malinowski found on those islands. How do you trust someone you have no history with, no shared community, no way to verify their word? Researchers studying eBay found that seller reputation had a measurable effect on both whether an item sold and what price it sold for, across data from hundreds of thousands of transactions. A 5-star rating isn't decoration. It's doing the same job as a Kula shell or a potlatch copper, turning an anonymous stranger into someone whose reputation is now on the line if they let you down. Game theorists have a term for this: indirect reciprocity. You don't need to have met someone before to trust them, as long as information about their past behavior can reach you. Your phone runs on the same trust engine a village runs on. It's just faster now, so the old assumption gets flipped. Markets didn't replace gift economies because gift economies were an inferior, less efficient version of trade. They solved a completely different problem. A market is built to let strangers transact once and never see each other again. A gift is built to make sure they can't. Both are useful. They're just different tools, built for different jobs, and for most of human history, the trust-building tool came first, because there was no institution around to enforce anything else. Which puts that colonial ban on the potlatch in a different light. It wasn't outlawing a party, it was severing the actual infrastructure holding a society's alliances, resource rights, and memory together, and replacing it with nothing that did the same job. So think back to that gift that made you uncomfortable, the one that felt too generous, too uneven. You weren't being ungrateful. You were running code that's been keeping human groups bound together for tens of thousands of years, long before contracts, before writing, before money existed to write anything down on. The debt never fully closed. And now you have to ask yourself, where else in your life is that same invisible ledger still running, quietly keeping you tied to people you'd otherwise have no reason to stay close to at all?